Hey guys, it's Christine, also known as Ivy Winter. Thank you for joining me for another Disney video. Someone recently asked me to create a video about how much a solo trip to Disney World costs, which is a really good question. A lot of the times when you see things about the cost of trips and packages, it's always for like a family of 4, a family of 5. There really isn't much mention of how much it's going to cost you as an individual. So I wanted to dive into general costs, what I have spent, and kind of give you an idea of how much you would spend for a solo trip. This also works really well if you are going with a group of friends, say, and you are going to be paying your way for it on your own. The only thing that would be different there is obviously if you're sharing rooms with people, you're paying less of a cost, hopefully. They're splitting it evenly, and you're gonna be paying less there, but still could be helpful when it comes to things like flights and tickets and things like that. So you might still wanna stay tuned even if you are just an individual in a larger group that's paying for yourself. Of course, before I even start this, I have to caveat that every trip is different. Costs are different depending on where you're coming from, depending on how many days you're staying. And so this isn't, 100% this is what it's going to cost you, but it's here to give you a good idea of basically what about a 4-day, 3-night trip would cost. I'm also focusing this on a little bit of a budget, so looking at cheaper options, and coming from somebody who is from New York and not a local, we are throwing in the cost of flights. I'm not looking at this from the view of a Florida resident, in which case, you might be driving and you don't have to pay for a flight. You might have a different kind of annual pass. You have a Florida resident pass. That might be something that's helpful for you as a solo traveler. So this is not that. If you want Florida resident information, there are plenty of channels out there. I'll actually put some in the description below. But this is more for somebody who is outside of Florida traveling by themselves to Disney World. So when I'm looking at overall costs, the 3 first major things I'm thinking about are my flight to get there, my hotel to stay in, and my tickets. So those are the things I'm going to be focusing on the most here. So first, to explain why I've taken so many solo trips. In the past, I've done this on an annual pass. So the cost of an annual pass currently in 2019 for a platinum pass, so that's basically 365 days, no blackout dates, park hopper pass to all 4 parks, is currently, as of this year, $894. Then there's also the Platinum Plus pass, which includes water parks with that, which is $994. The cost of annual passes go up every single year. So if it is something that you've been thinking about, I would buy in now, because by next year, we could be well over $1,000 for that Platinum Plus pass. So definitely keep that in consideration. But that is a big reason why I went down solo, is because I basically had a ticket paid for the year. I personally don't find water parks as an addition important to me. I don't go to the water parks, and if you're trying to be on a budget and are considering the pass as a solo traveler, then I would go without the Platinum Pass. I would just do the regular Platinum Pass. A lot of P's going on here. I just don't think it's always been worth it for me. But if this is a one-time solo trip, right, you're not necessarily getting an annual pass that you're gonna be able to use and make the most of, then let's just look at ticket prices in general, right? So again, I'm looking at this as 4-day, 3 nights, and the reason that I'm doing that is personally I have found that having at least 3 or 4 days in the parks is usually optimal, especially as a solo traveler, to get to do everything that you want to do. When you're solo, you have a little bit more time, I find, because you can utilize single rider to get through rides faster. There are a lot more fast passes for a single person, so I find that I actually can get a lot done and have a lot more time left over than I would think when I'm traveling to the park solo. So 3 to 4 days is usually about right for me. And so that's what I'm kind of focusing on here. Of course, the more park days you have, the more expensive the ticket. And now Disney's kind of changed how tickets go, where it's dependent on the time of year and the day that you're going, instead of just being one-size-fits-all pricing. It changes a little bit, a few dollars, depending on if it's peak season or off-peak season, though we know that I don't believe that there is such a thing as off-peak anymore. But the prices do fluctuate depending on the time of year that you're going. That's a new thing as of last fall. So for example, a 3-day park ticket with no park hoppers is gonna cost you about $350-ish. And if you add in Park Hopper, you're easily spending about $400. I believe this is before tax. Park Hopper is usually an extra $50 or $60 on a ticket. So that's something to weigh out first if it's important for you to park hop or not. And that has a lot to do with how many days you've given yourself. Park hopping obviously is a really good way to get through a lot of the parks if you have limited amount of days, but you can save several dollars if you don't park hop. And actually right now, Disney's doing this interesting ticket deal where they're doing tickets, 4-day non-park hopper tickets for specific prices, and they're valid during certain dates. I'm actually gonna put a screenshot up here that I took of what they've currently got on the website. So they've got some dates right now, they've got some dates in the spring and some in the summer. It gets a little more expensive as you go into those more popular months, but it's actually a pretty good deal. Right now you can get a 4-day no park hopper for under $400 with tax. That's for every single option that I saw, pretty much clocks in under $400 with tax. We're looking at like, you know, $375 or so, which is actually pretty good. If you have 4 days, then maybe you don't need a park hop, so maybe this actually would be a good ticket for you. So assume that's a decent amount of park time and you're spending $400 for a ticket. Let's just put $400 is the cost that we're gonna say for tickets for a decent amount of park time. Now flights, so I fly from New York to Orlando, and going by what I know the costs are from here, I can get a ticket round trip anywhere from about $160 to $220 if we're topping out a bit there on price. It's really important to take the time to research the average cost of flights from wherever you are, and then if the airlines around you do a lot of deals. So I fly JetBlue almost exclusively because their two major hubs are New York and Orlando, so they have a lot of flights between the two places, and they have deals almost every single month. A lot of them are last minute, like you'd have to book within the next 4 to 6 weeks. I also have their credit card, which gets me points, and usually I'm flying down to Florida for next to nothing. Sometimes I'm only paying the $5 tax. If I want to be fancy and get even more spacey, I'll spend the $40 because I'm just using points to get down there. I feel like if you're a solo traveler, it's really valuable, if not a credit card, which is, you know, a big commitment to want to open up a credit card, at least look for the free loyalty programs the airlines have, because you'll still be able to rack up some points from flying them to other places, and that could be super helpful here in affording a flight. But saying that we're paying full price, let's just throw on about $200 for your flight. Again, this all depends on where you're from. I know some people are probably saying $200, so it's easily $300 for me, or some people are probably saying like, I only pay $120. Obviously, you want to adjust that, but for sake of this conversation and how much I've paid, we're gonna say $200. So right now, you're about $600 for flight and ticket. So for resorts, I tend to stay the cheapest option. I have stayed at moderates before during a solo trip, or when I'm staying solo. Like there was a trip I had where I did go down with Rob and Kat, but I stayed in my own hotel room and had a few solo days, and I was at Coronado Springs. And the reason I did that was actually because I got a deal on it. It was one of their seasonal deals. Even then, that's still bringing those moderates down to, if you're lucky, $175 a night. That's kind of a rare one to catch. $200 a night, that's a lot for one person, right? So generally, I'm gonna stay in a value resort. And I feel like when you're riding solo, your resort is just a roof over your head and a bed to sleep in. I don't feel like I spend as much time at the resort when I'm by myself, or I'd rather explore other resorts than stay at my own. So I'm trying to go real cheap. And you can find at, you know, spring season or the quieter parts of fall, you can get a value resort. You can get like an all-star for, I've seen as low as $114 a night. I saw that for May actually this year when I was fiddling around with the idea of going back. I don't think I am though, until November. But you can ostensibly get a room for about $114, $115 a night. Gone are the days where you get them for like $79. That was a long time ago. I don't think that's ever coming back. But say you're staying 3 nights for that price. Before tax, you're paying about $375, say $400. Okay guys, a quick side note here. I know some of you are going to say, well, what about staying off property? I was looking at this from the lens of staying on property and taking advantage of Disney's free transportation ecosystem. Staying off property means that you're either gonna have to rent a car or pay for cabs, and in the end, that savings of a few dollars off of your nightly stay might actually end up being close to the same, if not more, than staying on property. So I'm looking at this from the perspective of staying on property, but by all means, I'm sure that there are hotels a lot cheaper that aren't Disney-owned hotels. So right now, your flight, your ticket, your hotel, we're looking about $1,000 for a solo trip. So of course, there are a lot of ways to make this cheaper. This is not like an end-all be-all of how much you're spending. You could easily decide to only do a couple of park days and do some quieter days on the off time. In fact, I know people who have gone down and have spent 4 or 5 days and only do like one park day and spend the rest of their time in Disney Springs or the boardwalk or mini golfing or other options on the resort just so they can get a Disney fix, but without spending a ton of money. That might not be ideal for you. It's not really ideal for me, which is why I'm pricing this as like, multiple park days, but it is possible, and you would knock down the price of this trip to a lot less, obviously. Even knocking like one park day and a night off, you make it like a 3-day, 2-night trip, which is pretty fast, but I've done it before. You're probably gonna easily save about $160+ off of this $1,000. Again, this doesn't even include food and merchandise. But honestly, souvenirs are optional. You can go to Disney and not spend a dime on them. And if you're really trying to make this a budget trip, don't. I don't think it's really worth it. Or you budget $50 for like one thing, Food is also really personal, I feel like. I could easily do quick service every single day for every meal, and that would cost me about $45 or so per day. I could even skip breakfast. I'm not a big breakfast person. I'm fine with just like a little croissant. So that would drop my costs down even more. But some people, you need 3 meals a day. Some people, you want to have a sit-down table service. So consider that when you are planning. What's the cheapest I've ever spent to go down there? Well, this was when I had an annual pass, and I know it's not cheap to get one. So really, I guess you have to consider the cost of that as well. But when I've had annual pass and I've had flights covered by points, I've paid just the cost of a hotel. So now maybe I'm just throwing $400 to go to an all-star resort and basically get my butt down there. And then I figure out spending a food and all that while I'm there. But again, to be fair, it's not like my trip only cost me $400 because I did spend like $800 on an annual pass. And so the cost of that depended on how many days in the entire year I actually went. That math I don't really know because I don't really remember how many days I went, but generally when I've had annual passes, I would say that I have had at least 12 park days, which is actually doing pretty all right in terms of the cost of that annual pass. Now we're looking at less than $100 a day. I know there are a lot of ways to make this a lot cheaper, but I'm looking at it from the most basic idea of like, I want to spend time in all 4 parks and have some time to actually do that stuff. That's about what you're looking at. Anyway, I hope this helped. I hope to answer questions about solo trips. They aren't cheap by any means, and I think the hardest cost sometimes is the hotel because you're not splitting it with somebody else. You're taking on that full cost of a room by yourself. So to me, that's the hardest hit sometimes. I think this is pretty much a good idea of how much you're gonna spend if you're considering a trip like this. If you have any other questions, or if you have ways that you have made really cheap trips solo, love to hear them in the comments below. If you like this video, then like it. If you like me, you should subscribe. I make videos every single week, and we've got lots of vlogs coming out in the next few weeks from the January trip and lots more ahead, a lot more solo content. So I really want to get back to doing more of that. So definitely subscribe and hit the notification button so you don't miss anything. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, have a great rest of the day. Bye.